What would happen if the most powerful rulers in the galaxy threatened Earth in front of every known species? And what if humanity had been waiting for that exact mistake for more than 30 years? Before the story begins, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves sci-fi stories where humans are underestimated until it is far too late. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was built to make every visitor feel small. Its black walls rose like cliffs around the room. They were polished so perfectly that every face reflected back from them, twisted and stretched in the dark stone. The ceiling was high enough to hold the carved seals of 47 species. Each seal belonged to a civilization that had once claimed power in the galaxy. Some of those civilizations still ruled. Some had been absorbed. Some existed now only as names in old council records. The chamber had seen empires rise. It had heard leaders beg. It had watched worlds surrender without a single shot being fired. Today, Earth sat at the far end of the table. Ambassador Lina Vasquez sat alone in the human seat. She had held that position for 11 years. In that time, she had learned the languages of the Salvon, the customs of the Drati, the silence patterns of the Velmir, and the threat rituals of the Kathari. She knew when a smile was an insult. She knew when polite words were really a warning. She knew when a council vote had already been decided before the discussion even began. She was 43 years old. Her face was calm, her dark eyes were sharp, and her posture never changed. She had spent more than a decade being spoken to like a child by creatures who believed humanity was young, weak, emotional, and lucky to have been allowed into the galactic order at all. Lina had never raised her voice in the council chamber. She was not planning to raise it today. At the head of the room, High Speaker Vethkal rose from his elevated throne. He was Salvon, almost 9 feet tall, covered in silver scales that reflected the chamber lights like polished metal. He wore ceremonial violet robes, the color of authority among his people. His 4 eyes moved across the council with slow confidence. When he spoke, the translation nodes hummed above the table. The council has reached a resolution regarding the human accord. No one moved. Every delegate already knew something important was about to happen. Many of them also knew humanity would not like it. But they were not worried. In their minds, Earth was still a young member species. Useful, clever, energetic, but not dangerous. Vethkal continued. Earth's territorial boundaries will be reduced by 60%. This will take effect in 30 standard cycles. All human military vessels above Class 4 must be decommissioned and surrendered to Council custody. A faint ripple moved through the room. Lina did not move. Vethkal's voice remained smooth. In addition, 22% of Earth's annual resource output will be redirected to Council infrastructure programs. Then came the silence. It was not peaceful silence. It was not respectful silence. It was the silence of predators waiting to see if prey would run. Vethkal let the moment stretch. Then he added, almost gently, failure to comply will be understood as a declaration of hostility against the Council and its member species. The consequences of such a declaration are well known. Several delegates shifted in their seats. The Kathari representative tapped his claws together in amusement. The Velmir delegate, small and gray and bent from generations of political submission, stared down at the table and said nothing. Everyone looked at Lina Vasquez. She remained still. Both hands rested flat on the table. Her breathing was slow. Her face showed nothing. If fear existed inside her, it had been locked far away, somewhere no one in that room could reach. Vethkal looked down at her. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council awaits Earth's acknowledgement. Lina looked up. Then she slowly looked around the chamber. Not with panic. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. She looked at them as if she were memorizing faces. One by one. The Salvon. The Kathari. The Drati. The silent Velmir. The smaller species that dared not speak. The military advisors watching from the side panels. The scribes. The guards. The observers. Then Lena reached beneath the table and touched the small communicator attached to her wrist. Council security had scanned that device 3 times before the session. They had dismissed it as ordinary diplomatic equipment. Lena pressed one key. An encrypted channel opened. It bounced through 17 relay points, crossed hidden military networks, and reached Earth. She spoke 3 words. They said it. Then she closed the channel. Vethkal blinked all 4 eyes. Among the Salvon, that was a sign of confusion. Ambassador, the Council requires a formal answer. Lena folded her hands. You already have it. No one understood what she meant. Not yet. Several delegates exchanged amused looks. The Kathari representative laughed, a low clicking sound that carried through the chamber. They believed it was human drama. A small act of pride from a species too young to understand its place. Lena Vasquez simply waited. Above the chamber entrance, the universal clock read 14:07:33. In 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the time would not matter anymore. Far outside Nexus Station, in the cold space between stars, things were already moving. They had been moving for a very long time. There is something humans do quietly that most other species never understood. Humans prepare for the worst while smiling at you. It is not always deception. It is not always cruelty. It is older than both. It comes from a deep place, from a history written in hunger, danger, storms, disease, war, and survival. Humanity had never been the strongest creature on its own world. Humans were not the fastest. They were not covered in armor. They had no claws worth fearing. No natural venom. No wings. No thick hide. No great teeth. But humans endured. They learned. They watched. They remembered. They planned. On Earth, survival had always belonged to the species that could think ahead. So when humanity first made contact with the Salvon Collective 41 years earlier, the public response had been wonder. There were celebrations in cities. Children looked up at the night sky with new dreams. Scientists cried on live broadcasts. Leaders spoke about unity, peace, and the beginning of a new age. But behind closed doors, something else happened. Within 72 hours of confirmed alien contact, 17 human government agencies opened new classified files. Not for diplomacy. For contingency. What if the aliens were hostile? What if they looked friendly but were not? What if they were friendly now but turned hostile later? What if humanity had to fight alone? What if humanity had to fight all of them at once? The public saw handshakes, flags, speeches, cultural exchange, and the first human ambassadors stepping into the galactic community. The public did not see the rooms below Geneva, the command centers hidden inside mountains, the old missile bases repurposed beneath frozen ground, or the quiet facility in rural Siberia that had no official name. There, ordinary-looking men and women began building answers to questions nobody was supposed to ask in public. One of those people was Dr. Yale Oren. She was 61 years old when first contact happened. She had spent most of her career studying how small nations survived wars against stronger powers. She understood occupation. She understood pressure. She understood how empires spoke when they wanted something and did not yet want to admit they were taking it. After first contact, Dr. Oren spent 3 years reading every translated Salvon historical archive humanity could access. What she found did not comfort her. The Salvon had absorbed 19 species before the creation of the Galactic Council. Absorbed was the polite word. In practice, it meant stripped of sovereignty, folded into labor systems, forced into military service, and renamed as protected member cultures. The Galactic Council was not a true government. It was a hierarchy wearing the language of cooperation. Dr. Oren wrote one line in her classified report that made every senior official uncomfortable. They will eventually come for us. We must be ready before they believe readiness is possible. That sentence became the seed of Protocol Prometheus. Prometheus was simple in concept and ruthless in patience. Earth would join the Council. Earth would smile. Trade. Share art. Attend ceremonies. Submit to procedures. Send curious diplomats. Ask simple questions. Make mistakes that look charming. Let the older species believe humans were eager, inexperienced, and a little too emotional for serious power. Meanwhile, every shared technology would be studied. Every engine design would be taken apart. Every shield system would be tested. Every council military doctrine would be modeled. Every station tour would become an intelligence operation. Every public document would be compared against private censor readings. Every human military report submitted to the council would be truthful enough to pass inspection and incomplete enough to protect reality. Warships registered with the council were older models. Newer vessels were listed as scrapped, experimental, or decommissioned. They were not scrapped. They were not decommissioned. They were waiting. By the time Lena Vasquez became ambassador, Protocol Prometheus was already 20 years old. By the time the Council threatened Earth, it had become a living machine spread across planets, moons, shipyards, intelligence offices, hidden stations, and officers who had trained their whole careers for a war they hoped never came. When Lena's message reached Earth, it landed in a Siberian facility. A duty officer sat at a quiet console deep under frozen ground. He had been waiting 11 years for those exact words. He did not panic. He did not shout. He did not call anyone for permission. He entered a 14-digit authorization code. He pressed his thumb to the biometric reader. Then he leaned toward the recorder and spoke with a steady voice. Prometheus is active. Authorization confirmed. All fleets execute positioning orders. Communications blackout in 30 seconds. Across Earth, across Mars, across lunar bases, across mining colonies, across hidden shipyards inside asteroid belts, lights came on. Engines woke in darkness. Human ships that did not officially exist began to move. Not with anger. Not with panic. With the quiet patience of a species that had spent decades sharpening one answer. Back in the council chamber, 4 minutes had passed since Lena had sent her message. Vethkal was growing impatient. He had asked twice for formal acknowledgement. Both times, Lena had said she was waiting for confirmation from her government. The Kathari representative had stopped laughing. Something about Lena's stillness had started to bother him. His species had been predators since before they built cities. They understood body language. They knew the difference between fear and calm. Lena was not acting like prey. She was acting like someone who already knew how the evening would end. At 4 minutes and 50 seconds, the first alert sounded. It was soft, almost polite. A low-level proximity flag. The kind of alert that happened when debris entered the outer sensor grid. Routine. Except this debris was moving information. In Nexus Station operations, a young officer stared at his display. He ran a second scan. Then a third. Then he opened a channel to the council chamber. Hi speaker, we are detecting unregistered vessels entering the outer perimeter. Vethkal turned his head. How many? 47 contacts. Correction, 63. They are approaching all primary docking quadrants. The chamber went still. Vethkal's 4 eyes narrowed. Species identification. The officer paused. 3 seconds. Long enough for fear to enter the room. Human, sir. But the configurations do not match anything in our registry. These are not the vessels we have on file for Earth's fleet. The chamber exploded with sound. Delegates rose. Translation nodes struggled as voices overlapped in clicks, growls, tones, and sharp harmonic bursts. The meaning was clear. How dare they? Vethkal raised one hand and forced silence. He turned toward Lena. Ambassador, explain this provocation immediately. Lena looked up at him. Those are our ships. We have records of every vessel in your fleet. Lena's voice stayed calm. No. You have records of the ships we allowed you to count. Another alert sounded. Then another. Then several at once. Long-range sensors began to paint a picture the Council tactical systems could not accept. Human contacts were not only appearing around Nexus Station. They were appearing near the Salvon Primary Relay Network. Near the Kathari Forward Staging Area. Near the Council Emergency Response Depot. Near fuel stations, communication nodes, military docks, and border control centers. Every strategic weak point. At the same time, Salvon Admiral Drexen sat on the military advisory panel. He pulled up the tactical overlay, stared at it, expanded it, and then went very still. He was not a politician. He understood war. And what he saw was not an emotional response. It was a completed plan. His voice was quiet. How long? No one answered. He asked again, not louder, only colder. How long have they been planning this? His tactical officer, Belsara, ran the numbers with shaking hands. The human positions were too precise. They matched old defensive gaps, relay blind spots, supply route timings, and emergency response delays. To create that pattern, they would have needed years of observation. Sir, Belsara said slowly, the positioning suggests pre-calculated planning of at least 15 to 20 years. Drexen closed his eyes. For decades, humanity had attended ceremonies. Argued about trade taxes. Asked questions in infrastructure briefings. Smiled at insults. Sent music, food, art, medical teams, and awkward cultural gifts. And all that time, human commanders had been quietly asking one question. Where do we put the ships if the Council finally makes its move? Not if. When? The universal clock read 14:14:10. Lena Vasquez stood for the first time. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. You had 6 minutes to reconsider, she said. You spent them laughing. Stay with the story, because this is where the galaxy learns what Earth was really doing for 30 years. Like the video if you are already hooked, subscribe for more human strength stories, and share this with a friend who enjoys watching arrogant empires make one terrible mistake. The first major record of what happened next did not come from human command. It came from a Drati scribe named Davil. Davil was not a soldier. He was a junior recording officer attached to the Drati delegation. His job was simple. Observe formal sessions, record council language, preserve records, and stay out of political danger. He survived Nexus Station. His recovered personal log became one of the most studied documents in galactic history. In it, he wrote that the first thing he noticed was the lights. At 14:15:02, the station's external illumination grid failed. Later, investigators would learn that a human electronic warfare system had entered Nexus Station's power distribution system through a weakness humans had discovered 9 years earlier. They had never reported it. They had filed it. They had waited. When the main lights went out, emergency lighting came on. It was red, which was a terrible choice for a station serving dozens of species, because at least 6 species could not properly see red wavelengths. But even those who could not see the color felt the change. The air changed. The station changed. The old certainty disappeared. High Speaker Vethkal began issuing orders. Admiral Drexen moved to take control of the station defense grid. Staff were told to evacuate. Davil did not leave immediately. He later wrote that he did not know why. He thought he needed to see. From an observation corridor on level 7, he watched the human vessels take position. They did not rush. They did not fire warning shots. They did not broadcast threats. They moved into place with terrifying calm. Their formation was geometric, precise, and interlocking. Every point defense system on Nexus Station was covered from an angle that made return fire useless. Every docking quadrant was controlled. Every escape route was watched. Every weapon line was blocked or exposed. The station tactical artificial intelligence flagged the formation as theoretically optimal. Then it spent 11 seconds trying to understand how humans knew enough about the station defense grid to create it. The answer was painfully simple. Human diplomats had taken 3 official infrastructure tours of Nexus Station over the past decade. They had asked polite questions. They had remembered everything. The first strike was not a weapon. It was a message. Every screen on Nexus Station changed at once. Public displays. Personal devices. Tactical readouts. Private communication panels. Navigation boards. Emergency terminals. All of them showed the same image. Ambassador Lena Vasquez seated in the council chamber. Below her face appeared a single message in the languages of every member species. Surrender Station Defense Command Codes. Release all non-combat personnel. Stand down. This offer expires in 90 seconds. Vethkal responded on an open channel. His words were recorded, though many later reports softened them. He refused. The 90 seconds passed. What followed lasted 11 minutes and 4 seconds. Davil wrote that he knew the exact time because he kept looking at the clock. He said it felt important to know how long it took for something that had existed for centuries to fall. The strange part, he wrote, was that it was not chaos. That was what frightened him most. There was no wild rage in the human attack. No dramatic speeches. No reckless charges. No screaming revenge. Every movement had a purpose. Human teams breached only the sections they needed. Others held back. Some cut communications. Others disabled weapons. Others locked docking controls. Others secured medical bays and evacuation paths. It looked less like an assault and more like a checklist. They had a list. They were working through it. Davil hid in a maintenance corridor on level 9. At one point, a human soldier passed less than 2 meters from him. She wore dark body armor. No visible rank. No decoration. No wasted movement. She turned her helmet toward him. Davil froze. He was Drati. Small, thin, built for record-keeping rather than fighting. He had no weapon. His hands shook. The human soldier looked at him for 1 second. Then she looked away and moved on with her team. She had judged him in that instant. Not a threat. Not a target. Not important to the mission. He lived because the humans knew exactly who they had come for. The 47 council leaders had been moved to a secured chamber on level 12. For generations, council officials had been told Nexus Station was impenetrable. They had believed it. Human breaching teams did not. Station command fell at 14:26:07. When emergency lighting shut off and human white band lights came on, the station became quiet. Davil wrote that it was not normal quiet. It was the silence of a machine that had been running for centuries and had suddenly stopped. Later, human soldiers began moving non-combat personnel to evacuation bays. Velmir staff. Drati scribes. Cossati researchers. Service workers. Minor delegates. Medical support personnel. One human soldier handed Davil water. He did not know what to do with it. So he accepted it. In his log, he wrote the line that would later be repeated across the galaxy. They were never afraid of us. Not once in 41 years of contact, not once in 30 years of council membership, not once through 11 years of being spoken to like children. They were waiting. That was not completely true. Humans had been afraid. Fear had existed in every secure briefing, every military calculation, every family goodbye before deployments that officially did not exist. But humanity had never allowed fear to be the loudest thing in the room. That was the difference. While Nexus Station fell, news began to spread. It spread badly at first. The Salvon state broadcast called it a security incident. Then the signal went dark for 4 hours. When it returned, a veteran Salvon broadcaster appeared on screen. He had delivered galactic news for 40 years with a calm voice and perfect posture. This time, his face looked hollow. He read a prepared statement. The council leadership had been incapacitated. Nexus Station was under temporary external administration. All Salvon military assets were ordered to hold position pending government review. Then the broadcast cut to orchestral music. That music had not played on Salvon state television since the death of their High Sovereign 30 years earlier. On Kathari networks, the reaction was louder. Kathari military commentators shouted over one another. Tactical displays flashed behind them. Generals argued in aggressive tones because Kathari culture processed stress through volume. One general demanded total war against humanity. Another said the council had made a political mistake and rushing into battle would be foolish. A third began to say that the council had never been legitimate in the first place. His microphone was cut before he finished. On Velmir relay stations, the reaction was quiet. The council had never invested properly in Velmir communication systems. Many settlements received the news through weak local transmissions and old screens that flickered when the wind was high. In one northern settlement, an old grandmother watched footage of Nexus Station on a cracked display. The building she sat in had once been a council labor processing office. It had never been fully repaired. She watched human ships lock down the most powerful station in the galaxy. Then she turned to her 8-year-old granddaughter and spoke in the old Velmir language, the one the council had tried twice to remove from schools. Someone finally got tired. The granddaughter did not fully understand. But she remembered the words for the rest of her life. Across the galaxy, military analysts began doing the same thing. They pulled every human record they had. Diplomatic questions. Trade reports. Cultural visits. Science papers. Technical comments. Requests for clarification. Tour logs. Human proposals rejected as silly or overcautious. They read all of it again. With new eyes. A Kathari intelligence analyst named Grevshin sat alone in his office and opened 6 reports he had written over 14 years. In those reports, he had warned that human questions at council meetings were not random. They were patterned. Strategic. Too careful. Too interested in infrastructure, supply chains, defense timing, and emergency procedures. His superiors had ignored all 6 reports. Now he placed them side by side on his desk. The picture was obvious. Humanity had spent 30 years politely mapping every weakness in council power. Not by stealing in the usual way. By asking questions no one thought to fear. Why would anyone refuse a question about power grid design from a species that was supposedly still impressed by faster-than-light travel? Why would anyone worry when humans asked about emergency docking protocols after saying they were concerned about civilian safety? Why would anyone panic when human engineers requested old technical manuals because they were eager to learn? Grevshin wrote a new report. His conclusion was short. We were the threat. We were always the threat. Humanity was not preparing for conquest. Humanity was preparing for the war we were eventually going to start. He stared at the report for a long time. Then he sent it to 20 different offices without asking permission. That day, in marketplaces, colony halls, underground cities, floating habitats, desert mining towns, and ocean settlements, smaller species gathered around screens and listened. They did not celebrate immediately. It was too dangerous to celebrate. But something moved through them. A feeling like air pressure before a storm breaks. The Galactic Council had fallen. And the galaxy was still there. 11 hours after the Council threatened Earth, Lena Vasquez prepared to speak to the galaxy. She chose a human vessel for the broadcast, not Nexus Station. That choice mattered. Nexus Station was a wound now. A necessary wound, perhaps, but still a wound. She did not want to speak from a captured throne. She wanted to speak from something that moved. A ship. A thing going somewhere. The broadcast went out on every council frequency, which human communication teams had taken control of 6 hours earlier. It reached relay towers, colony networks, private receivers, military listening posts, academic institutions, religious houses, public squares, and illegal news channels hidden from council regulators. Within 40 minutes, most of the known galaxies saw the same image. Lena Vasquez sat at a plain table. She wore a simple gray jacket. No flag stood behind her. No military symbol. No golden seal. No throne. No guards visible. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired. She had not slept. She looked directly into the camera. Many species found that unsettling. In galactic diplomacy, direct eye contact during broadcast was usually avoided. It could mean challenge, threat, or dominance. Humans just did it. Lena did not use the traditional council greeting. She simply began. 11 hours ago, the Galactic Council formally threatened the people of Earth with territorial seizure, forced military surrender, and resource extraction under penalty of eradication. This threat was delivered in the Grand Chamber, in formal session, before representatives of every member species. She paused. Then said, Earth responded. Across the galaxy, people leaned closer to their screens. I want to speak clearly, without diplomatic language, to every species watching this transmission. What happened today was not the beginning of a human empire. It was not a declaration of conquest. If conquest was our goal, this conversation would not be happening. You would already be receiving a list of conditions. She folded her hands on the table. The council structure was not true governance. It was predation with paperwork. Those words would later be repeated in hundreds of languages. The Velmir have spent 2 centuries watching their minerals taken and their children conscripted while the council called it integration. The Cossati lost their sovereignty through a legal clause that was deliberately mistranslated in the original accord. We have those documents. We have had them for 9 years. She placed a small data chip on the table. Everything is here. Every mistranslation. Every false report. Every resource diversion. Every hidden order. We will transmit it in full to every independent news network and academic institution in the galaxy within the hour. Not because we want chaos. Because the truth has been locked away long enough. Her face did not change. I want to speak now to the large species. The ones with fleets. The ones currently deciding whether humanity is an enemy or a warning. The room behind her was silent. We did not destroy the council because we are stronger than it. We destroyed it because it threatened us, because we were ready, and because someone had to. If you choose to make us your enemy over that, we will defend ourselves completely again. No one doubted her. But that is not what we want. She looked straight into the camera. We want what every species at the bottom of the council table wanted and was never offered. A real seat. A system where the Velmir home world belongs to the Velmir. Where the Cossati choose their own soldiers. Where small species are not used as shields. Where diplomacy is not built on fear. She let the silence last. Then her voice softened, only a little. We are building something new. It is already drafted. It is not perfect. We are not asking for trust we have not earned. We are asking one question. Another pause. Would you like to try again, as equals? The broadcast ended. In the Siberian facility, the duty officer who had activated Prometheus watched the replay on a small monitor. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he picked up his coffee, which had gone cold hours earlier, and drank it anyway. The first response came from the Velmir. That surprised no one who had truly understood the council. It shocked everyone who had not. It was not a formal diplomatic message. It did not come through official channels, because the Velmir had not controlled their own official channels in 170 years. It was a handwritten letter. Physical paper. Made from a plant that only grew in the northern settlements of the Velmir home continent. A community archivist scanned it and transmitted it through a long-range device built from old council agricultural monitoring equipment. The letter was addressed simply. To the human ambassador, wherever she is. It read, "We accept. We have nothing to offer you except our word, and we understand if that is not enough. But we are saying yes because we are tired of waiting for someone to ask." It was signed by 47 community leaders. Not government officials. The Velmir no longer had a recognized government. The council had dissolved it during the third generation of integration. At the bottom of the letter was the old Velmir sovereign seal. No one had used it in public for 170 years. Someone had kept it hidden in a box under a floor. They had kept it because some part of them believed that one day there would be something worth stamping again. Lena Vasquez read the letter twice. She did not write a response immediately. She did not speak. Her staff had learned that this was what emotion looked like in her. Stillness. The Cossity responded next. They did it loudly, from 7 channels at once, because Cossity communication culture involved everyone speaking until agreement emerged from the noise. Human translation teams had to work through overlapping messages for 6 hours. The final meaning was clear. Yes. With conditions. The Cossity included a list of 23 grievances against the council. They wanted every one of them acknowledged in any new system. The list was detailed. Too detailed to have been written in one day. They had been keeping it for a very long time. A young Cossity diplomat appeared on a joint transmission 12 hours after Lena's broadcast. Her speech was fast, sharp, and direct. The translator had trouble keeping up. "We have been waiting for someone who was not afraid of the Salvon. You were not afraid. So we are here. What do you need us to do?" 3 more species followed within 48 hours. All small. All exploited. All answering with a speed that proved they had been ready before anyone asked. Human reception teams had prepared for this. Not because they were certain it would happen, but because 18 months earlier, someone had asked a practical question. If the council falls, which species will need help first? So transport ships were ready. Medical vessels were ready. Food stores were ready. Translation teams were ready. Human military planners did not call this mercy. Dr. Oren had called it completeness. In one early Prometheus note, she had written, "If we do this, we do it completely." That meant removing the threat. It also meant helping the people crushed under it. The first Velmir delegation arrived at a human orbital station 7 days after Nexus Station fell. There were 12 of them. 6 elders. 3 archivists. 2 young speakers fluent in interstellar common. And 1 old woman whose name did not appear on the manifest. When asked her identity, she gave only her title. First Keeper. She stepped out of the transport and onto the human station floor. The gravity was slightly different from Velmir standard. The air smelled strange to her, warm and biological in a way she could not describe. The lights were softer than council stations. The human reception team stood at a respectful distance. The station commander had been told not to rush them. The first keeper walked 3 steps. Then stopped. Slowly, she lowered herself and pressed both palms to the floor. Some humans almost moved forward to help her, but the station commander raised one hand. No one moved. This was not weakness. It was ceremony. The old Velmir gesture of touching new ground. An acknowledgement of place. The Velmir had not performed it outside their own home continent in longer than most living memory. The first keeper remained that way for several seconds. Then she stood and began to cry. Not quietly. Not with control. She wept with the full weight of a people who had lived too long under someone else's boot. No human interrupted her. One soldier gently placed a water vessel nearby and stepped back without forcing eye contact. Later, during the first formal Velmir human cooperation session, someone asked the first keeper what she had felt in that moment. She thought for a long time. Then answered, I was feeling the floor. I was checking if it was real. That sentence traveled farther than any official speech. It appeared on walls. In songs. In memorial halls. In the first schools reopened under Velmir control. I was checking if it was real. And for the first time in generations, it was. Before we move into what happened after the fall, take a second to like this video, subscribe if you enjoy deep space stories with patient humans, and share it with someone who believes quiet people are often the most dangerous ones in the room. 1 year and 3 days after Nexus Station fell, a building stood on the outskirts of Geneva. It had no final name yet. For now, people called it the Congress Hall. The building was only 40% complete. Its outer shell was made from glass, reclaimed stone, and metals donated by 5 different worlds. It looked nothing like Nexus Station. That was intentional. No towering walls. No elevated throne. No single seat at the head of the room. No dark stone designed to make others feel small. The central chamber was circular. The seating arrangement caused political arguments before construction was even finished. In the council, powerful species sat closest to the center. In the new chamber, the smallest and least numerous species would sit closest to the center. Larger powers would sit farther out. Human architects called it symbolic balance. The Salvon called it insulting. The Velmir called it the first honest room they had ever seen. Someone leaked the building plans to the public. The larger species reacted with outrage. The smaller species reacted with something translators struggled to express. It was not joy exactly. It was not relief. It was the feeling of seeing a door where a wall used to be. By then, 7 species had formally joined the new political framework. Its provisional name was the Congress of Shared Worlds. The name had taken 4 months to choose because every dramatic proposal made someone suspicious. In the end, everyone accepted the dullest option because it sounded least like an empire. 11 more species were in talks. Their caution was understandable. Joining humanity after Nexus Station meant betting on the species that had destroyed the old order in 11 minutes. For some, that looked like freedom. For others, it looked like a new danger. 3 major powers had mobilized fleets. The Salvon Collective had recalled diplomats from neutral stations and placed itself under military government. In 1 year, its leadership had changed twice. Each new administration was harder than the last. A Salvon fleet of 400 vessels now sat near the outer rim of its territory, facing human space. The Kathari Grand Assembly was divided in a way Kathari politics had not experienced for centuries. Some governors wanted war. Some wanted neutrality. Some quietly opened unofficial talks with human diplomats while publicly pretending they had done no such thing. Earth watched everything. Not nervously. Carefully. Humanity had learned long ago that victory was not the end of danger. Sometimes victory was when danger became more complicated. Lena Vasquez sat in an unfinished office overlooking the construction site. The walls still smelled of fresh sealant. The floor panels were not fully installed. The heating system made a low clicking sound every few minutes. On her desk lay the recovered log of Davil, the Drati scribe. She had read it many times. Still, she opened it again. His final line always pulled her back. They were never afraid of us. She looked out the window and thought about that. It was wrong. There had been fear. She had felt it during closed briefings. She had watched commanders calculate losses they did not want to say aloud. She had seen young officers stare at maps of possible war zones and realize they might be ordering ships into death. She had carried fear herself. 11 years in the council chamber had not been easy. Every insult had gone somewhere. Every threat had been filed. Every patronizing smile had been remembered. But humans had learned something important. Fear could sit in the room. It could not be allowed to command it. Below her window, construction crews worked on the central floor of the new chamber. A Velmir consultant stood beside a human engineer, pointing at a support structure. The engineer listened carefully and took notes. The image held Lena longer than she expected. A year ago, that Velmir consultant would have needed council permission to travel. Now he was helping design the room where his people would speak. That was the work. Not the strike. Not the broadcast. Not the moment everyone replayed in dramatic documentaries. This. The slow, boring, difficult work of building something better after destroying something cruel. A knock came at the door. Her aide, Mara, stepped in. The COSIT delegation is asking about the voting weight protocol again. Lena closed Davil's log. Tell them we meet Thursday. I will have a revised draft. Mara nodded. The first Kathari observer from the breakaway governor's territory arrives tomorrow. Make sure the observer suite is prepared for Kathari respiratory needs, Lena said. Last time the humidity was wrong, and no one told me until after. Already handled. Good. What else? Mara hesitated. The Salvon fleet moved 12 light minutes closer to the border this morning. Lena stood still. Which admiral? Vrexel. The younger one. Lena thought about that. Vrexel was ambitious. Angry. Skilled enough to be dangerous. But not foolish enough to begin a war without certainty. Probably. Flag it to the Defense Council, Lena said. Continue monitoring. No public statement yet. Mara nodded and left. Lena picked up her jacket. As she moved toward the door, she stopped beside a framed photograph on the wall. It was not official. Someone had printed it during the first weeks after the Velmir arrived. The image showed the first keeper kneeling on the floor of the human station, palms pressed down, checking if the ground was real. Beneath the photo, someone had written the same sentence in several languages. She was checking if it was real. Lena looked at it for a long moment. Then she walked into the corridor. The floor was unfinished. Her steps were quiet. No reporters followed her. No cameras recorded her. No grand speech waited. Only meetings. Drafts. Arguments. Border warnings. Translation problems. Medical relief delays. Old wounds. New promises. As she walked, she said something softly to the empty corridor. We did not do this because we were the strongest. We did it because someone had to go first. No one heard her. That was fine. The work did not need applause. Humanity had always been strongest when it worked. But the galaxy did not become peaceful simply because the council fell. Power does not vanish. It looks for a new shape. In the months after Nexus Station, the old council loyalists spread one message again and again. Humanity was not liberating anyone. Humanity was replacing the council. At first, the message found listeners. It was an easy fear to believe. After all, humans had hidden ships for decades. They had hacked council systems. They had moved fleets into position around the galaxy before anyone knew they existed. That did not look innocent. Lena understood that better than anyone. So did the Human Defense Council. They made a decision that many military leaders hated. Humanity would publish parts of the Prometheus archive. Not everything. Some defensive secrets remained sealed. No responsible species revealed every blade it carried. But enough was released to prove intent. The records showed years of warnings. Years of council pressure. Years of careful restraint. They showed that Prometheus included not only military action, but evacuation planning, medical relief, food transport, language support, and political restoration models for exploited species. The galaxy read those documents slowly. For some species, it changed everything. For others, it changed nothing. The Salvon military government called the release fabricated. The Kathari Central Command called it manipulative. The Velmir called it proof that someone had seen them before they had asked for help. A young Velmir student named Arel wrote a public message that became widely shared. You planned for our survival before you knew we would trust you. I do not know if that means you are good. I know it means you are not like them. That sentence became uncomfortable for many human officials. Because it was honest. Humanity was not pure. No species was. Earth had governments with ugly histories, corporations with sharp teeth, leaders who loved power too much, and soldiers who could make terrible mistakes. Lena never allowed the new allies to forget that. During the first public forum of the Congress of Shared Worlds, a Cosity representative asked her directly, "How do we know humans will not become the next council?" Lena did not answer quickly. The room waited. Finally, she said, "You do not know. That is why the system must be built so you do not have to trust us blindly." That answer mattered. Because it did not ask for faith. It asked for structure. The new Congress charter limited military authority. No species could command shared forces alone. Emergency powers expired unless renewed by a supermajority that required support from small member species. Resource agreements had to be published in every native language involved. Translation disputes would be reviewed by independent cultural courts. Every clause carried a memory of something the old council had abused. The Velmir demanded language protection. The Cosity demanded military consent. The Drati demanded archive independence. Humans demanded mutual defense. And everyone demanded that no throne exist in the chamber. The arguments were exhausting. Sometimes talks lasted 14 hours and ended with nothing decided. Sometimes delegates stormed out, then returned hungry and embarrassed. Sometimes translation systems failed and turned legal language into insults. Once, a human coffee machine in the temporary negotiation hall became the cause of a diplomatic incident when a Kathari observer mistook espresso for a chemical stimulant weapon. It took 3 hours to calm everyone down. The Velmir found this hilarious. The Kathari did not. Lena kept a private list of such incidents. Not because they were important on their own, but because they reminded her what real diplomacy looked like. Messy. Slow. Annoying. Alive. The council had been smooth because everyone feared the same few powers. The Congress was difficult because people were finally speaking. Meanwhile, near the Salvon border, Admiral Vrexel watched human space. He commanded 400 vessels. His officers wanted action. His government wanted strength. His public wanted revenge. His pride wanted blood. But Vrexel had studied Nexus Station. He had studied it obsessively. 11 minutes and 4 seconds. That number haunted him. He knew the human fleet around Nexus Station had not been the full fleet. No one knew where the rest was. That was the problem. Humanity's greatest weapon after Prometheus was uncertainty. Every Salvon strategist asked the same questions. How many ships did Earth truly have? How many hidden stations? How many alliances? How many weaknesses had they mapped? How many traps were already waiting? Vrexel hated those questions. He also respected them. So he moved his fleet 12 light minutes closer. A signal. A threat. A test. Humanity did not overreact. No fleet charged out. No dramatic broadcast followed. No insult came from Earth. Instead, a single message arrived through military channels. It was addressed to Admiral Vrexel personally. It contained 3 items. A formal notice that Salvon fleet movement had been observed. A map showing every humanitarian evacuation route that could be affected by further escalation. And a private line written by Lena Vasquez. Do not make your people pay for Vethkal's pride. Vrexel read that line 6 times. Then he ordered his fleet to hold position. He did not withdraw. That would look weak. But he did not advance. That was enough. For now. If you are enjoying this slow burn of strategy, courage, and galactic payback, give the video a like, subscribe for the next story, and share it with the person who always says humans in sci-fi should be taken more seriously. Not all dangers came from large fleets. Some came from desperate people who had lost their old place in the galaxy. 3 months after the first Congress Charter draft was published, a group of former Council security officers attempted to attack a Velmir supply convoy. The convoy carried medical fabricators, seed vaults, and water purification units. No warships. No weapons. Just the basic tools needed to help a damaged world breathe again. The attackers expected an easy strike. The convoy seemed lightly guarded. It was not. 2 human escort vessels dropped out of silent drift inside the debris field before the first attacker could fire. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. All attacker ships were disabled, not destroyed. Every surviving crew member was taken into custody. That decision caused anger on Earth. Many humans wanted harsher action. They had seen what the Council had done. They had read the reports. They did not want mercy for the people who served that system. But Lena defended the decision in a closed session that later became public. "We are not building justice if we only know how to punish," she said. "But mercy without accountability is just another form of permission." The attackers were tried in a joint tribunal. Velmir judges sat beside human legal officers and Drati archive observers. For the first time in 2 centuries, Velmir victims testified without Council officials controlling the record. The trial was not perfect. Nothing was. But when the final judgment was delivered, one thing was clear. The victims had spoken. The galaxy had heard them. That mattered more than most people understood. For centuries, the Council had not only taken resources and soldiers. It had taken narrative. It had decided what counted as history. Who was a rebel? Who was a criminal? Who was protected? Who was primitive? Who was grateful? The new Congress began its work by returning stories to the people who had lived them. Archives opened. Records were translated. Old Council classifications were challenged. Some documents were so brutal that even hardened military analysts had to stop reading. There were evacuation denials. Forced labor quotas. Biological studies conducted without consent. Legal agreements signed by representatives who did not understand the language. Military orders that sent smaller species into first contact war zones as expendable buffers. The galaxy had known pieces of the truth. But pieces are easier to ignore than the whole shape. Once the whole shape appeared, silence became harder. A Drati scholar gave the most precise description. The old Council did not hide every crime. It hid the connections between them. Humanity had found those connections. That was why the broadcast archive changed everything. Not because it revealed cruelty. Many people already knew cruelty existed. It revealed system. And the system could be dismantled. On Earth, the response to humanity's new role was complicated. Some people celebrated. Some demanded isolation. Some feared endless war. Some worried that human leaders would use galactic danger to increase control at home. There were protests in major cities. Not all against the Congress. Some were against military secrecy. Some demanded public review of Prometheus. Some called Lena a hero. Others called her the face of a hidden state that had lied to its own people for decades. Lena did not dismiss them. When she returned to Earth for the first time after the fall, she requested a public hearing. Her advisors warned against it. It would be messy. It would expose disagreement. It would give enemies propaganda. Lena said, "Good. Let them see we are not the Council." The hearing lasted 2 days. She answered questions from elected officials, journalists, military families, colony representatives, and civilians. One question came from a teacher in Nairobi. Did humanity have the right to make these preparations without public consent? Lena sat with the question. Then she said, "No free society should be comfortable with secrets this large. But no living society survives by announcing every shield before danger arrives. The question now is not whether Prometheus was clean. It was not. The question is whether we have the courage to place what comes after it under law. That answer satisfied almost no one completely. Which may be why it was remembered. Real answers rarely satisfy everyone. They simply tell the truth without pretending it is easy. The public review changed parts of the new defense system. Civilian oversight expanded. Hidden budgets were exposed. Some officials resigned. A few were prosecuted for abuses unrelated to the council conflict, buried inside systems that had grown too powerful in secret. This shocked many alien observers. The Salvon called it weakness. The Velmir called it astonishing. A Cossati commentator said, "Humans defeat their enemies, then immediately start fighting themselves about whether they did it properly." The comment went viral on Earth because humans found it painfully accurate. But that argument, ugly as it was, became one of humanity's strongest diplomatic tools. Earth was dangerous. Yes. Prepared. Yes. Capable of violence. Clearly. But Earth was also noisy, divided, self-correcting in strange bursts, and almost allergic to allowing any authority to go unquestioned forever. To species raised under council silence, that noise sounded like instability. Then slowly, to some of them, it began to sound like air. 6 months later, the first temporary Congress session opened in Geneva. The main building was still unfinished, so delegates met in a converted international conference hall. The chairs did not fit everyone. The translation system failed twice. The Drati complained about lighting. The Cossati complained that human meeting procedures were too slow. The humans complained that Cossati consensus noise made note-taking nearly impossible. The Velmir said very little at first. Their delegation sat close together, watching everything. When the first vote was called, the issue was simple. Recognition of restored Velmir local governance. There were no objections. The vote passed. For a moment, the Velmir delegation did not react. Then the first keeper lowered her head. One of the younger Velmir began crying. The hall stayed quiet. The vote itself was procedural. The meaning was not. After 170 years, the Velmir existed in law again. Not as a protected labor culture. Not as an integrated resource group. As themselves. That night, celebrations began in northern Velmir settlements. People brought out hidden flags. Old songs returned. Children learned words their grandparents had whispered only at home. The old sovereign seal appeared on walls, paper, clothing, and public buildings. The council had spent generations trying to reduce the Velmir into a category. One vote did not heal that wound. But it named the wound correctly. Healing often begins there. At the same time, Salvon propaganda intensified. Humanity, they claimed, was staging emotional theater. The Congress was a puppet structure. The Velmir were being used. The Cossati were unstable. The Drati were opportunists. The old order, they said, had brought peace. It was a familiar argument. Every empire says peace when it means obedience. The message still worked on some worlds. Especially those that had benefited from council power. A wealthy Salvon industrial city held massive rallies demanding revenge. Speakers stood before holograms of Nexus Station and promised restoration. In one speech, a rising Salvon leader named Theral said, "The humans are not liberators. They are a disease that attacks order." The crowd roared. Human intelligence flagged the speech. Not because of the insult. Because 3 known military financiers stood behind him. 2 weeks later, a Salvon-funded sabotage cell was discovered on a neutral fuel station near the Drati corridor. Their target was not human. It was a Drati archive transport carrying copies of council crime records. They wanted to erase evidence. A joint Drati human security team stopped them. The news changed Drati politics overnight. Until then, many Drati had been cautious observers. They were not heavily exploited under the council. They had status, archives, procedural influence, and a reputation for neutrality. Many believed they could remain between sides. The attempted attack on their archive transport ended that illusion. Davil, the scribe who survived Nexus Station, spoke publicly for the first time. He stood before the Drati assembly, thin hands trembling, and read from his own log. He described the red lights. The human soldier who spared him. The water vessel. The quiet after command fell. Then he looked at the assembly and said, "I believed neutrality was safety. I was wrong. Neutrality only protects the archive until someone decides the archive is dangerous." The Drati voted to enter formal Congress negotiations the next day. That decision shook the galaxy. The Drati were respected record keepers. Their support gave the new Congress something it badly needed. Memory with credibility. The Salvon called them traitors. The Drati replied by publishing 3 centuries of sealed council minutes. The galaxy stopped sleeping for a while after that. The records were worse than expected. They showed exactly how council language had been used to soften conquest. Invasion became stabilization. Forced labor became resource partnership. Child conscription became youth service integration. Cultural erasure became administrative alignment. Every cruel thing had been given a clean name. Humans understood that trick too well. Earth history had its own ugly examples. That may have been why humanity recognized the pattern so quickly. People who survive monsters at home can sometimes smell them in space. Around this time, Lena visited the unfinished Congress Hall late at night. She often did that when she could not sleep. Security hated it. She went anyway. The central chamber had no seats yet. Only markings on the floor where circles would be installed. Moonlight came through the glass shell, and construction equipment rested in silence. In the center of the room stood a temporary table covered in plans. Lena walked around it slowly. Every mark represented an argument. Where should translation booths go? How should oxygen levels vary by section? Could aquatic delegates attend physically or only through immersion chambers? Should military representatives sit in the same chamber as civilian delegates? Could a species still under hostile occupation hold a provisional seat? Nothing about equality was simple once it became architecture. She touched the edge of the table and thought of Nexus Station. The throne. The height. The black walls. The way Vethkal had looked down at her. Then she thought of the first keeper pressing her palms to the floor. A room could teach people what power meant. So this room had to teach something different. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. Lena turned. It was Davil. The Drati scribe looked embarrassed. "I was told you come here when you cannot sleep," he said. "That sounds like a security failure," Lena replied. "I am Drati. We find records." Despite herself, Lena smiled. Davil stepped into the chamber and looked around. "It feels strange," he said. "What does?" "A room being built before it knows who will fill it." Lena nodded. "That is probably the most honest thing about it." Davil looked at the circular floor markings. "Many Drati are afraid of joining." "They should be," Lena said. He looked at her. "That is not the answer most diplomats give." "I know." "Why say it?" "Because it is true. Joining this will be risky. Not joining will also be risky. I cannot make that choice easy for you." Davil studied her for a moment. Then he said, "You are very bad at comfort." "I have been told. But better at truth than most." Lena looked back at the unfinished chamber. Truth is easier. Comfort has to survive later. For a while, they stood in silence. Then Davil said something quietly. "When the soldier passed me in the corridor, I thought I was dead. I am glad you were not." She looked at me like I was a fact. Lena turned slightly. "A fact?" "Yes. Not a person she hated. Not a creature she pitied. A fact to evaluate. Threat or not threat. Target or not target. Lena nodded slowly. That is training. It saved me. Yes. It also frightens me. It should. Dabble seemed relieved by that. Later, he would write that this was the first moment he began to trust Lena Vasquez. Not because she promised safety. Because she did not pretend power was harmless. The galaxy had heard many promises. It needed fewer promises. It needed limits. Give this story a little push before the next turn. Hit like if the tension is working, subscribe for more HFY stories, and share it with someone who enjoys smart humans more than lucky humans. The first true test of the new Congress came from a world called Namur. Namur was not famous. It was a water-rich moon on the edge of old Council space, inhabited by a small amphibious species called the Orati. The Council had used Namur as a refueling and biological research site for decades. When the Council fell, local security collapsed. 3 private extraction companies moved in. They were not official Council forces. That made the problem harder. They claimed legal contracts. They claimed employment rights. They claimed the Orati had agreed to the arrangements. The Orati said those agreements had been signed under military pressure and written in a language their leaders could not read. It was exactly the kind of dispute the old Council had created everywhere. The Orati requested Congress protection. The Congress was not ready. Its charter was unfinished. Its shared defense rules were incomplete. Some member species argued that intervention would look like human expansion. Others argued that refusal would make the Congress nothing more than speeches. The debate lasted 30 hours. The Orati representative, a soft-voiced elder speaking through an aquatic translation collar, listened to everyone discuss procedure. Finally, she asked, "Are we early?" The hall quieted. Lena looked at her. The elder continued, "You are building a place where people like us can ask for help. But perhaps we have asked before the walls are finished." No one spoke. That sentence ended the debate. The Congress authorized its first joint protection mission. A joint one. Human escort ships carried Velmir legal observers, Drati record keepers, Cossati negotiators, and medical teams from 3 species. The rules were strict. No occupation. No resource seizure. No permanent military base. All actions recorded. All contracts reviewed. All Orati testimony preserved in their own language. The extraction companies hired mercenary ships and assumed the Congress force would hesitate. They were half right. The Congress hesitated for exactly as long as its rules required. Then it acted. Human vessels blocked the mercenary approach lanes. Cossati negotiators opened a public channel and read the disputed contracts aloud, including every mistranslated clause. Drati observers broadcast the records live. Velmir legal staff identified 6 violations of the Provisional Rights Charter. When one mercenary ship powered weapons, a human escort disabled its engines with 1 shot. No one else fired. The private companies withdrew within 2 days. The Orati held their first free local assembly 3 weeks later. The mission became a defining moment. Not because it was large. Because it showed what the Congress might become. Power with witnesses. Force with rules. Help without ownership. That last part mattered most. After the Orati mission, more species entered talks. Not all joined. Some only watched. But watching itself had changed. Before Nexus Station, species watched the Council because they feared missing danger. Now they watched the Congress because they feared missing possibility. That difference was small but historic. The Salvon understood it. Which was why Admiral Vrexel received new orders. Advance. Not attack. Advance far enough to force humanity to respond. The Salvon military government wanted footage. They wanted human fear. They wanted a mistake they could use. Vrexel hated the order. It was political, not strategic. But he was still Salvon. Still military. Still bound. His fleet moved another 30 light minutes toward human-monitored space. This time, Earth responded more visibly. 3 human battle groups appeared along the border. Not from behind Earth. From positions the Salvon had not known existed. That was the message. We were already here too. The standoff lasted 6 days. Every major network carried it. Commentators predicted war every hour. In Geneva, Congress talks slowed as delegates watched the border. The Velmir feared abandonment. The Cossati demanded readiness. The Drati prepared emergency archives. The Orati sent a message offering medical ships, which made several human officers emotional in ways they did not admit. On the 6th day, Vrexel requested a private channel. To Lena Vasquez. The request was unusual. He should have contacted Human Military Command. Instead, he asked for the ambassador who had been present when Vethkal threatened Earth. Lena accepted. The call was audio only. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Vrexel said, "Your ships were waiting." Lena replied, "Yes." "How long?" "Long enough." "I need a number." "You do not." A pause. Then Vrexel said, "My government believes you will not risk war while building your Congress. My government believes you are too intelligent to start one for theirs. You think I control this? I think you control whether your ships cross the line in front of them." Vrexel was silent. Lena continued. "If you advance, people die. Maybe yours. Maybe ours. Maybe both. And for what? To prove the old council can still cast a shadow? You destroyed our political order. Your political order threatened mine first. You humiliated us." "No," Lena said. "Your leaders did that when they assumed no one else had been thinking. That struck harder than an insult." Vrexel exhaled slowly. "What do you want, Ambassador?" "Hold position. Open back channel talks. Let your civilians breathe before your military government spends their children trying to resurrect a dead room. You speak boldly to someone commanding 400 ships. I spent 11 years listening to people with power speak without courage. Your ship count does not impress me as much as your choices." Vrexel did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "If I hold, they may remove me." "Yes." "If I advance, you may destroy me." "Yes." "You offer no easy path." "No. Humans are unpleasant negotiators. We learn from unpleasant teachers." The channel closed. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then the Salvon fleet stopped advancing. Officially, mechanical synchronization issues required a temporary hold. No one believed that. But it gave everyone room to step back without admitting fear. The first back-channel Salvon contacts began 9 days later. They did not involve surrender. They did not involve recognition. They began with prisoner lists, border safety procedures, and medical exchange protocols. Small things. But every piece begins as a small thing someone chooses not to break. Inside the Salvon collective, cracks widened. Not all Salvon supported the old council. Many had benefited from it without looking closely. Some had opposed it quietly. Others had lost family to its wars too. Now they began asking questions. Why had Vethkal threatened Earth so openly? Why had military leadership ignored human capability? Why had council records been sealed? Why were Salvon children taught that absorbed species were grateful when the newly released archives showed otherwise? The military government responded with arrests. Arrests created protests. Protests created martyrs. Martyrs created memory. And memory, once released, is difficult to put back in a cage. Human analysts watched the Salvon unrest carefully. Some wanted to encourage it. Lena opposed direct interference. "We are not here to choose their future," she said. "We are here to make sure they cannot choose everyone else's." That became another uncomfortable line. Because restraint is harder when your enemy is finally weak. A year and a half after Nexus Station, the Congress Hall opened. Not finished perfectly. Opened. There were still external sections under construction. Some environmental systems required manual adjustment. The aquatic chambers had delayed installation. The Cossatee complained that the speaking system reduced natural overlap and made them sound too orderly. But the central chamber was ready. Delegates entered without ceremony first. That had been Lena's request. No grand parade. No military flyover. No throne carried in. Just people walking into a room. The Velmir delegation entered first, because the smallest founding member had been chosen to open the floor. The first keeper was older now and moved with assistance, but she refused a hover chair for the final steps. At the center of the chamber, she stopped. Everyone thought she might press her palms to the floor again. She did not. Instead, she looked around the circle and said, "It is real." Then she took her seat. The first official session began with a question, not a declaration. The question was placed before every delegate in every language. What must power never be allowed to do again? For 2 days, they answered. The Velmir said power must never own a people's name. The Cossatee said power must never take soldiers without consent. The Dratee said power must never control the archive. The Oratee said power must never turn help into possession. The Humans said power must never be trusted without limits. Others added their own. By the end, the answers formed the opening principles of the Shared Worlds Charter. It was not poetic. It was not short. It was not easy to chant. But it was honest. And perhaps that mattered more. Outside the hall, thousands gathered. Humans. Velmir. Cossatee. Dratee. Oratee. Observers. Journalists. Survivors. Critics. People who believed. People who doubted. People who simply wanted to see the building with their own eyes. A young human reporter interviewed an elderly Velmir man near the edge of the crowd. She asked, "Do you trust humanity?" The old man looked amused. "No." The reporter blinked. He continued, "Trust is what the council demanded before taking everything. I do not trust humanity. I trust the chair my people now sit in. I trust the record being public. I trust that if humans lie, we can say so loudly in the same room." The clip spread quickly. Many humans found it humbling. Lena found it perfect. That was the point. Not worship. Not gratitude. Not blind loyalty. A room where even the smallest voice could accuse the strongest one and remain alive after speaking. That was the revolution. Not the ships. The ships had only opened the door. The real victory was keeping the door from becoming another gate. As the Congress grew, human culture changed too. Children learned galactic languages in school. Velmir restoration songs became popular in human universities. Cossatee debate methods ruined several human political programs because guests kept speaking over one another until the hosts gave up. Dratee archive ethics became required training for journalists. Oratee water architecture inspired new designs in coastal cities. The galaxy was not simply being rescued by humans. It was changing them. That frightened some people on Earth. It thrilled others. It annoyed everyone trying to write education policy. Still, slowly, life moved. Trade routes reopened under new agreements. Former council bases became shared logistics centers. Medical teams crossed old borders. Some worlds refused Congress contact entirely. Some Salvon loyalist colonies taught children that humanity was a monster hiding behind kind words. Perhaps some of those children would believe it forever. History never moves everyone at once. But the old certainty was gone. The council had claimed to be eternal. It had lasted until the moment it threatened the wrong species in the wrong room after giving them 30 years to prepare. As this galaxy changes around humanity, do one small thing for this channel. Like the video if the story earned it, subscribe for more original sci-fi, and share it with a friend who would have joined Protocol Prometheus without asking twice. 2 years after Nexus Station, Lena returned to the old station. Not for ceremony. For inspection. Nexus Station had changed. The black walls remained, but the council seals had been removed from the ceiling. Not destroyed. Preserved in the Dray-T archives as historical objects. The elevated throne had been dismantled and placed in storage. Some argued it should be melted. The Velmir opposed that. Do not destroy proof, the first keeper had said. So the throne remained, catalogued, labeled, stripped of power. Nexus Station now served as a transitional archive, tribunal center, and neutral docking facility. Lena walked through the grand chamber alone. Her security team waited outside. The room felt smaller than she remembered. That surprised her. For 11 years, it had felt enormous. Now it was only a room. She stood where the human seat used to be. She could almost see Vethkal rising again. Hear the translation nodes. Feel every eye turn toward her. Feel the weight of the communicator beneath her hand. They said it. 3 words. A lifetime hidden inside them. Mara, her aide, entered quietly. The tribunal is ready. Lena nodded. Today's case involved former council officials accused of authorizing forced military recruitment from Kasati settlements. Witnesses had traveled for weeks to testify. The accused claimed they had only followed legal procedure. The archive said otherwise. As Lena turned to leave, she saw Davil standing near the entrance. He had come as an archive witness. You look uncomfortable, he said. I dislike this room. I assumed humans enjoyed conquered places. Some do, Lena said. The sensible ones distrust that feeling. Davil looked up at the empty ceiling. It is strange without the seals. It is better. Yes, he said. But strange. They walked together toward the tribunal chamber. Along the way, they passed a group of Velmir students on an educational visit. They were younger than the council occupation itself, born into the last years of enforced silence. Their teacher spoke softly, explaining what the station had been. One student saw Lena and froze. Then whispered to another. Soon they all stared. Lena pretended not to notice. Davil did not. You are becoming myth, he said. I hate that. Most myths do. I am not a myth. I am a tired diplomat with bad sleep and too many meetings. That is not how children will tell it. Then adults should correct them. Davil smiled faintly. Adults rarely win against stories. He was right. Stories had already begun. On some worlds, humans were called liberators. On others, destroyers. On Salvon loyalist channels, demons. In Velmir songs, door breakers. In Kasati military slang, the quiet knife. On Earth, the phrase they said it became a cultural marker, printed on shirts, carved into memorials, used badly in advertisements until public backlash forced several companies to apologize. Lena disliked almost all of it. The truth was less clean. Humanity had prepared because it was afraid. Humanity had struck because it was threatened. Humanity had helped because enough people believed power should answer to something beyond itself. There was no single pure motive. There rarely is. But history does not require purity to change direction. It requires action at the moment delay becomes surrender. The tribunal that day lasted 9 hours. Kasati witnesses spoke in fast overlapping bursts, their pain rising through the translation system in uneven waves. Former council officials tried to hide behind procedure. Dray-T archives answered with dates, signatures, orders, and recordings. At the end, the tribunal found the accused guilty. The punishment was not death. It was confinement, permanent removal from public authority, and mandatory testimony preservation for future education. Some Cossati wanted execution. A few humans agreed. The Cossati representative who had first asked what humanity needed them to do surprised everyone by supporting the tribunal sentence. Killing them ends their fear, she said. Making them speak truth keeps ours from being erased. That line entered the charter education program. Again and again, the Congress returned to the same idea. Record. Limit. Witness. Answer. Not perfect justice. Better justice than silence. Later that evening, Lena stood at an observation window overlooking the docking arms of Nexus Station. Human ships moved beside Velmir transports and Dray-T archive vessels. A Cossati medical craft docked awkwardly because its pilot ignored station guidance until the last second, which made 3 human controllers shout at once. Life continued. Messy and loud. Mara approached with a tablet. You need to see this. Lena took it. A news report from Salvon Prime. Mass protests had reached the capital district. Military police had withdrawn from 2 areas rather than fire on civilians. Admiral Vrexel had issued a statement calling for civilian transition talks. Lena read it twice. Is it real? We think so. Lena looked back out the window. For years, humanity had prepared for Salvon attack. No one had fully prepared for Salvon change. That was always the harder possibility. Enemies were simple when they remained enemies. Transformation required imagination. 3 days later, Vrexel made direct contact again. This time, video. He looked older than before. His scales had dulled slightly. Stress had left visible marks near his eyes. You were right, he said. Lena did not ask about what. He continued, my people should not pay forever for Vethkal's pride. That is a beginning. It is not surrender. I did not ask for surrender. My government may fall. Yes. What comes after may be worse. Yes. You always say yes to unpleasant possibilities. They are usually the ones most likely to matter. Vrexel looked away for a moment. Then back. If a civilian transition council forms, will the Congress recognize it? If it is legitimate, and if it accepts external review of former council crimes. Humiliation again. Accountability. To the defeated, they often look the same. Lena leaned closer. Then build something your children do not have to defend with lies. Vrexel said nothing. The call ended soon after. Within a month, the Salvon military government collapsed. Not peacefully everywhere. There were riots, defections, arrests, and 2 failed hardline coups. But Admiral Vrexel refused to fire on civilian crowds. That decision broke the old command structure. A provisional civilian council formed on Salvon Prime and requested observer status in the Congress of Shared Worlds. The request almost tore the Congress apart. The Velmir opposed it first. How can those who held the chain enter the room with those who wore it? Their representative asked. No one had an easy answer. The Cossati demanded trials before talks. The Dray-T demanded archive access. Humans were divided. Some wanted to bring the Salvon in quickly to prevent renewed war. Others said speed would betray victims. The debate lasted weeks. Finally, the first keeper spoke. Age had made her voice thin, but the room still quieted for her. I do not forgive the Salvon, she said. I do not know if I ever will. But the room we built cannot only welcome the wounded. It must also know what to do with the guilty when they come without weapons. She paused to breathe. Not trust. Not comfort. Not forgetting. A chair under watch. That became the compromise. The Salvon Provisional Council received limited observer status. No voting rights. Full archive cooperation required. Tribunal access required. Public acknowledgement required. Protection from revenge attacks granted only to civilian populations. Many hated it. Which probably meant it was close to justice. When the first Salvan observer entered the Congress Hall, the air felt like glass. Velmir delegates did not look at him. Cossati delegates looked too much. Drati recorders captured every movement. Human security watched everyone. The observer was not Vrexel. He had refused the role, saying soldiers should not be the first face of repair. Instead, the observer was a teacher from Salvan Prime whose students had participated in the protests. He stood in the entrance for a moment, silver scales catching the chamber light. Then, slowly, he bowed. Not the deep bow of submission. The formal Salvan gesture used when entering a place where one's authority did not apply. It was a small gesture. But every species understood it. The Velmir representative did not bow back. No one asked him to. That was also part of the new world. Reconciliation could not be demanded on schedule. It had to be allowed to arrive honestly or not at all. Years would pass before Salvan membership became possible. Maybe decades. The Congress did not rush it. Speed had been one of the Council's old weapons. It forced signatures before translations, votes before testimony, integration before consent. The Congress learned to move slowly when speed served power more than justice. Humans found this frustrating. Humans like solutions. But some wounds are not solved. They are carried differently. 3 years after the fall, the completed Congress Hall hosted its first full session. By then, 14 species had joined as members. 9 more were observers. 4 remained openly hostile. Several stayed silent, which in galactic politics often meant listening while pretending not to. The chamber was filled at last. Small species near the center. Larger ones farther out. Translation systems humming. Environmental fields glowing softly around specialized seating. No throne. No single head of the table. Lena Vasquez no longer represented Earth alone. A full human delegation had replaced her as Earth's formal voice. She now served as transitional chair, a position with limited power and too much paperwork. At the opening session, she looked around the room and remembered the old chamber. The laughter. The threat. The clock. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. She had spent years wondering whether there had been another way. Perhaps there had been. Perhaps somewhere in the deep field of possibility, Bethkal had chosen wisdom over pride. Perhaps the Council had reformed. Perhaps Earth never activated Prometheus. Perhaps all those hidden ships remained hidden until they rusted in silence. But that was not the universe she lived in. In this one, they had said it. And humanity had answered. The first major vote of the full Congress concerned a simple principle. No member species could be forced to surrender military assets to another without transparent legal review and collective approval. It passed unanimously. A small thing on paper. A direct answer to the threat that began everything. Lena looked toward the Velmir seats. The first keeper was not there. She had died 6 months earlier. Her successor wore a small piece of the old sovereign seal around her neck. When the vote passed, she touched it with 2 fingers. Lena saw the gesture and looked down. Some victories are too quiet for applause. The session continued. Resource restoration plans. Border recognition. Archive funding. Medical access. Trade rules. Boring things. Beautiful things. The galaxy had mistaken drama for power for too long. Real peace sounded like people arguing about water rights for 3 hours and then returning after lunch to finish the paragraph. Outside, the completed building reflected the afternoon sun. A group of schoolchildren from 6 species toured the public gallery. Their teacher explained the chamber design. One human child asked why the biggest species sat farthest out. The guide answered, because strength can hear from the edge. The smallest voices need the center. The child accepted this with the easy seriousness of the young. Lena heard the exchange from the corridor and stopped. Mara stood beside her, older now too. That line will be everywhere by tomorrow, Mara said. Good, Lena replied. You hate slogans. I hate empty slogans. That one can stay. Mara smiled. Then her tablet chimed. Border report. Bad? Not today. Lena let out a breath. Not today. That was often the best peace could offer. Not forever. Not solved. Not safe beyond question. Just not today. And if enough people worked hard enough, not today could become tomorrow, and then the day after, and then a generation. That was how civilization was built. Not by one victory. By repeated refusal to return to the old cruelty. Before the final stretch, show the channel some support. Tap like if this story kept you watching, subscribe for more cinematic HFY scripts, and share it with someone who understands that peace is strongest when it has teeth. 5 years after the fall of Nexus Station, a memorial was opened inside the old Grand Chamber. Not a human victory memorial. That had been debated and rejected quickly. Instead, the chamber became the Hall of Warnings. At the center stood no statue. Only the old council table, cut into pieces and arranged in a circle on the floor. Visitors could walk around it, reading inscriptions in dozens of languages. Each inscription named one council abuse. Each had a record number beside it. Not legend. Evidence. The elevated Salvon throne stood behind glass at the far end, powerless and silent. A simple plaque beneath it read, "Authority without accountability becomes hunger." School groups came often. Some human children found the hall boring at first. Then they reached the testimony displays. A Velmir miner describing forced extraction quotas. A Kossati mother describing the day her son was taken for service. A Drati archivist explaining altered records. An Orati elder showing the contractor people had never been able to read. By the end, the children were usually quiet. That was the purpose. Not shame alone. Memory. Lena visited the hall on opening day. She did not speak publicly. The main address was given by the Velmir representative, now elected under restored local governance. She spoke in Velmir first. Then in Interstellar Common. This place was built to make us small, she said. Now it teaches the cost of making anyone small. The applause was soft. The kind that carries respect rather than excitement. After the ceremony, Lena walked alone to the glass case holding Vethkal's throne. For a moment, she saw him again. 9 feet tall. Silver-scaled. Certain. Earth's territorial boundaries will be reduced by 60%. Human military vessels will be surrendered. Non-compliance will be interpreted as hostility. The consequences have been made clear. She remembered her own hand under the table. The small communicator. The 3 words. They said it. She wondered what Vethkal had thought in his final minutes of power. Had he understood? Had he realized Earth was not reacting, but completing a plan? Had he known the laughter around the chamber had cost them the last 6 minutes they would ever control? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Pride often protects itself until the end. Behind her, footsteps approached. Admiral Vrexel stopped beside her. He was no longer commander of the Salvon border fleet. After the transition, he had retired from military office and later became part of the Salvon Accountability Commission. Many hated him. Some respected him. Almost no one understood him fully. Lena glanced at him. I did not expect you here. I did not expect to come. They stood in silence before the throne. Vrexel said, I served men who admired this room. So did many. I thought power required height. Lena looked at the glass. It often enjoys it. My students ask why the humans won. Lena smiled faintly. And what do you tell them? That humans did not win because they were stronger. She looked at him then. Vrexel continued, you won because you believed we might one day become exactly what we were. That sounds almost generous. It is not. It is humiliating. Truth often is. He gave a dry Salvon expression that was not quite a laugh. I also tell them we lost because we mistook patience for weakness. Lena nodded. That part is accurate. Vrexel looked toward a group of Velmir visitors entering the hall. Do they hate me? Some probably do. Yes. Does that surprise you? No. Good. He was quiet for a moment. Then said, I am trying to teach Salvon children that guilt is not death. It is responsibility. Lena studied him. That may be the most important thing you ever command. He did not answer. Years earlier, she might have enjoyed seeing Salvon pride reduced to this. Now she only felt the weight of it. Change was not clean. But it was real. As they left the hall, a young Velmir child ran past them, laughing, chased by a human child and a Kossati child whose translator was shouting warnings no one understood. The three children nearly collided with Vrexel. Their guardians froze. The Velmir child looked up at the old Salvon admiral. For one fragile second, history stood between them. Then the child said, sorry, in rough interstellar common and ran on. Vrexel watched him go. His voice was very soft. He does not know my face. Lena understood what he meant. The child knew history. But not fear in the bones. Not the same way. That is good, she said. Vrexel nodded slowly. Yes. It is. 5 more years passed. The Congress of Shared Worlds was still imperfect. Sometimes deeply. There were corruption scandals. Border disputes. Trade arguments. Accusations of human influence. Accusations of Velmir moral authority being used too heavily. Kossati voting blocks that formed and broke in the same week. Drati archive delays that made everyone furious. Orati environmental vetoes that stopped 3 major construction projects. The Congress survived all of it. Not because everyone agreed. Because disagreement had somewhere to go. That was what the old council never allowed. Disagreement had been treated as disorder. The Congress treated it as weather. Sometimes dangerous. Always expected. Earth changed too. Prometheus became required study in military academies, not as a perfect model, but as a warning about secrecy, preparation, and the moral cost of waiting in silence. Lena's 3 words became history curriculum. Students debated whether Earth should have warned the Council more directly. Whether earlier action could have saved exploited species sooner. Whether hiding fleets was defensive wisdom or democratic failure. Whether the fall of Nexus Station was justice or merely necessary violence. Lena approved of every uncomfortable question. A society that stopped questioning its own victories was already building a throne. In her later years, she taught a seminar for young diplomats. On the first day, students expected stories of Nexus Station. Instead, she gave them a translation dispute from an Orati water rights agreement and made them work through it for 4 hours. At the end, one student asked when they would study the famous moment. Lena said, you already are. They did not understand. She explained. Nexus Station was 11 minutes. This agreement will affect 3 million people for 50 years. Learn which one deserves more attention. That became another famous line, though she wished people would stop making her lines famous. When she finally retired from public service, the Congress Hall held a small ceremony. She requested no grand honors. The Congress ignored this request politely and gave her several. The Velmir gifted her a piece of polished stone from the floor of their restored assembly hall. The Kossati gave her a recording of 700 voices arguing gratitude at once, which they insisted was emotionally clear. The Dray gave her the first bound copy of the complete Nexus Station archive. The Aura gave her a water bowl from Namur, grown from living coral glass. Earth gave her a standing ovation that lasted too long. Lena endured it with visible discomfort. At the end, she spoke briefly. I have been thanked many times for what humanity did. I accept those thanks carefully, because what we did began with violence. Necessary violence, I believe, but still violence. Do not let anyone turn it into a clean story. The hall was silent. She continued. The better thing came after. Every vote. Every argument. Every translated document. Every convoy that brought medicine instead of orders. Every child who learned another species' name in its own language. That is the victory worth protecting. She looked around the circular chamber. Power will always try to become hunger. Do not feed it. That was her final official speech. Years later, after Lena Vasquez died, the Congress declared a day of reflection. Not mourning alone. Reflection. Across worlds, people told the story in different ways. On Earth, they told it as the day humanity refused to kneel. On Velmir, they told it as the day someone asked if they wanted to stand. On Kasati worlds, they told it as the day fear stopped being policy. Among the Dray, they preserved every version and argued about all of them. On Salvon Prime, the story remained difficult. Some still hated her. Some studied her. Some admitted, quietly, that she had forced their civilization to see itself. At the Hall of Warnings, visitors still walked around the broken council table. The old throne remained behind glass. Children still asked why it was kept. Guides still answered, because forgetting is how thrones grow back. And in the Congress Hall, above the central entrance, there was no statue of Lena. No carved human symbol. No image of warships around Nexus Station. Only a sentence from the first keeper, written in every member language. I was checking if it was real. Below it, in smaller letters, was Lena's answer, taken from a private corridor recording discovered years later. Someone had to go first. No one knew who authorized adding it. Everyone suspected Mara. By then, the galaxy had entered a new age. Not a perfect age. Perfect ages belong in propaganda. This was an age of arguments, treaties, mistakes, repairs, investigations, shared missions, tense borders, and children growing up with maps that did not place the powerful at the center. Humanity did not rule it. That was the point. But everyone remembered the lesson. When humans smile and ask polite questions, do not assume they are harmless. When humans sit quietly through insult, do not assume they have accepted their place. When humans prepare, they prepare all the way. And when someone threatens Earth in a room full of witnesses, they may discover that the answer was written decades before the threat was spoken. The Galactic Council had believed history belonged to those above. Humanity proved history could also be made by those at the far end of the table. The ones listening. The ones counting exits. The ones remembering every insult. The ones waiting for the exact moment when patience became action. And when that moment came, Lena Vasquez did not shout. She did not threaten. She did not beg. She pressed one key and sent 3 words home. They said it. 6 minutes later, the old galaxy ended. And for the first time in centuries, something new had room to begin. If this story made you feel the weight of that moment, leave a like before you go, subscribe for more powerful sci-fi stories, and share this video with someone who would never underestimate Earth after hearing those 3 words.